Ever since they moved into the house, Nora and her husband James heard it, a soft crying sound. At first, they thought it was the wind, then maybe a neighbor's TV. But it always came at night, always from below. The house didn't have a basement, or at least that's what they were told. They checked the blueprints. No stairs, no trapdoors, just solid flooring beneath the wooden panels. Still, the crying came. A child's whimper, then scratching, then knocking. Every night at 3:14 a.m., James started recording it. At first, there were faint noises, then whispers. On the fourth night, the whisper clearly said, "Open it." He played it to Nora. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, they tore up the floorboards in the living room. Nothing. Then the dining room, then the hall. Finally, beneath the rug in the kitchen, they found it. A metal ring, rusted, attached to a small square wooden door. No hinges, no keyhole, just the ring. They looked at each other. James pulled. It didn't budge. That night, the crying was louder, closer. The whispers turned into screams. "Let me out. Mommy, I'm cold. Don't leave me again." The next morning, James wasn't in bed. Nora found the basement door open. The wooden square now lifted slightly, and the air was freezing. She called down. No answer, only breathing. She hasn't seen James since, but the crying continues, and now it calls her name. Every night at 3:14 a.m., the door clicked shut above him. Total darkness swallowed the stairwell, leaving James standing alone with only the beam of his flickering flashlight. He banged on the door. "Maya, open the door!" No answer. He shouted again. The silence was heavy, like the house itself was listening. Then the stairs creaked behind him, but he hadn't moved. He turned slowly. The beam caught nothing but stone walls and thick shadows, but something was off. The basement was deeper than it looked from outside, much deeper. He descended. Step by step, the air grew colder, thicker. Moisture clung to the stone walls. A faint hum pulsed through the ground, like the house had a heartbeat. At the bottom, he found another door, smaller, wooden, marked with scratches, not from tools, but fingernails. Something had tried to get out. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to climb back up those stairs and break the door down. But the whisper came again. His name. Maya? No, it was her voice, but wrong, hollow, echoing, like someone trying to remember how her voice sounded. He reached for the door. As he touched the handle, the flashlight died. Total blackness. He stood there frozen, listening. Then, a creak, a wet exhale. Something moved in the dark, not footsteps, but dragging, flesh on stone, slow, approaching. He tried to turn and run, but his feet wouldn't obey. The air was thick, heavy. Behind him, the wooden door began to creak open on its own. And from its shadow, something whispered, "We were waiting." James didn't remember moving. One moment he was standing in front of the door. The next, he was inside. The air was different here. No sound, no breathing, only silence so deep it pressed against his eardrums like static. The room was narrow and impossibly long, walls stretching beyond the reach of sight. A single bulb swung from the ceiling far above, casting a dim, circular glow. Under it, a small wooden chair, and in the chair, a child. Or what looked like one. It was facing the other way, head tilted slightly, hair long and matted. Its fingers tapped gently on the armrest. A pattern. Tap, 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 tap. James stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Hello?" The tapping stopped. The head turned slowly, too slowly. It wasn't a child. Its face was pale, stretched too tightly across its skull. Its eyes, empty, not black, just void. It opened its mouth. No teeth, no tongue, just darkness. Then it whispered, "Why did you leave?" James stumbled back. He hadn't moved, but the walls did. Now they were closer, the room smaller. The bulb flickered, and in the brief strobe of dying light, James saw them. Figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressed against the walls, staring at him with hollow sockets, mouths sewn shut with wire, hands bound in front of them, like children being punished. They moved in perfect silence, all of them, stepping forward. The child thing stood from the chair and pointed. "You were supposed to stay." James turned and ran, but the hallway stretched endlessly. No doors, no end. Only the sound now, growing behind him. Not footsteps, not whispers, just breathing, loud, wet, hungry. And as he ran, something began calling his name from both sides of the walls. Voices, familiar ones. Voices from his past, from people who were supposed to be dead. James kept running, but the corridor didn't end. The floor beneath him was no longer solid stone. It felt soft, almost alive. Every step sank slightly, like walking on damp flesh. The voices from the walls grew louder. Some whispered, others cried, a few screamed. They knew his name. They knew what he had done. They knew what he had forgotten. "Do you remember the lake? Why didn't you save her? We waited for you, James. You promised you wouldn't leave. Open your eyes. Open them." James slammed his hands against his ears. "Shut up!" But the hallway obeyed no rules. Suddenly, the floor dropped. He fell, endlessly, until he landed hard in a pitch-black room. He lay there, breathing fast, ribs aching. Then he saw a glow, a faint red light pulsing behind a thick, rotted curtain. He stood. The light was coming from a mirror, cracked, framed in iron, and inside, his reflection wasn't moving. James stepped closer. The reflection stared back. Same clothes, same face, but the eyes, they were pleading. Then the reflection raised its hand and wrote something backward on the glass. "In fog. Don't trust her." James blinked. The reflection was gone. The light died. Behind him, someone spoke, gently, calmly, a woman's voice. "Mr. Harris, you weren't supposed to find this place." He turned around slowly. A woman in a white nurse uniform stood a few steps away. No eyes, just skin. And yet, she seemed to see him. "We've kept the door locked for years," she said, voice flat. "But you had to hear it, didn't you?" James tried to speak. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she smiled with lips that didn't quite stretch right and whispered, "Would you like to remember?" James stared at her. The eyeless nurse. The voice like silk on broken glass. Her question still echoed in the dark. "Would you like to remember?" He shook his head, but the room didn't care. The air thickened. The walls closed in, and the floor beneath him rippled like water. Suddenly, images, flashes, burned behind his eyes. A girl, standing by a frozen lake, calling his name, her hand reaching out. Then the ice cracking. Screams, a splash. Then, silence. James gasped. He stumbled back, holding his chest. His heart raced, pounding like it wanted out. I didn't mean to. I tried to." The nurse tilted her head. "No, James, you watched." Tears filled his eyes. "She was my sister." "You left her," the nurse said calmly. "And now she's down here, waiting." Behind her, another door appeared. This one wooden, old, but pulsing with red light from beneath the cracks. The nurse turned to it. If you want the crying to stop, you'll have to open it. James stepped forward. The closer he got, the louder the crying became. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many. Children, men, women, all weeping, all begging, all calling his name. James reached for the handle. It burned his fingers, but he didn't stop. He twisted it slowly. The door creaked open. Inside, darkness, and at the far end, a small figure stood, back turned, hair wet, dress soaked. She whispered, "You came back." James stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. And then, silence. Except for the soft, wet sound of footsteps approaching him from behind. James didn't turn around. He couldn't. The footsteps behind him were slow, deliberate, as if whatever it was knew that fear would paralyze him more than pain ever could. He clenched his fists. His breath came in shallow gasps. The little girl, the figure at the far end of the room, didn't move, but her voice filled the chamber. "Why didn't you save me?" he whispered, barely audible. "I was scared." The air turned colder. From the darkness, dozens of whispering voices rose again, overlapping, layered, mocking him, repeating his words back to him like a broken record. "I was scared. I was scared. I was scared. So she drowned. She drowned. She drowned." He finally turned around. Nothing. No footsteps. No figure. No monster. Just the mirror again, cracked. This time, showing not his reflection, but the lake, frozen, empty. And then, a ripple, a pale hand breaking through the ice. He reached out to touch the glass. The instant his fingers made contact. Cold, real cold. Not from the mirror, from behind him. He spun around and saw her. His sister, exactly as he remembered her the day she died. Soaked, shivering, lips blue, eyes wide. But there was something wrong. Her mouth was sewn shut with black thread. And yet, he still heard her voice, inside his head. "It wasn't the lake that took me. It was the house." The walls trembled, the floor cracked. And the ceiling above began to bleed, thick dark liquid seeping through the stone. James backed away, and as he did, the girl raised one arm and pointed to the far corner. A door appeared, but it was upside down, hanging from the ceiling, swinging open slowly, revealing a spiral staircase leading even deeper. She looked at him silently, and for the first time, he understood. He hadn't reached the basement yet. He had only just begun to descend. The door on the ceiling kept swinging, back and forth, back and forth. The spiral staircase beyond it spun into a darkness too thick for light. James stood frozen beneath it. His sister still stared at him, unmoving. Her sewn mouth twitched as if she wanted to scream but couldn't. Then she nodded, once. James didn't know why, but he understood. She wanted him to go, to keep descending. He stepped beneath the door. The moment he touched the first step, gravity flipped. His feet lifted from the floor and landed upward onto the stairwell, as if he were meant to walk on the ceiling. He climbed, downward, but upward, a paradox. The air changed again. It no longer smelled of damp stone. Now it was metallic, like blood and rust. And something else. Smoke. The deeper he went, the hotter it became. Drips of liquid metal fell from unseen pipes. He passed doors marked in languages he didn't recognize. Each one pulsed, as if alive. Each one watched him pass. One of the doors had fingernails wedged in the cracks. Another was whispering his name backwards. Still, he kept going. Finally, he reached a platform. A massive chamber opened up before him, circular, with mirrors covering every inch of the wall. Each mirror showed a different version of him. In one, he was laughing. In another, sobbing, covered in blood. In a third, old, chained to a hospital bed. In a fourth, buried alive, screaming as dirt rained on his face. They all looked directly at him. All except one. The mirror at the center. It showed only the house. Dark, still, silent. Until the front door opened and a woman stepped inside. Nora. She had come looking for him. The shards of the mirror trembled as something long and thin began pulling itself through. James stumbled backward, watching in horror as a skeletal hand, gray, wet, too long for a human, reached out and clawed the ground. Then another, and then the face followed. Not a monster, not a ghost. It was him, his own face, bloated, pale, dead-eyed, dragging itself from the glass. Mouth stitched shut, eyes full of betrayal. James screamed. He turned to run back up the spiral stairs, but they were gone. So was the ceiling door. So was the room. He was back in the house, back in the living room. It was morning. Sunlight leaked through the curtains. Everything looked normal. Nora sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. "Morning," she said, smiling gently. "You okay? You look pale." James blinked. He was clean, dressed, no dust, no blood, no scratches. The door to the basement, gone. No trapdoor, no metal ring, just smooth, unbroken floor. Was it a dream? He forced a laugh. "Yeah, rough night, that's all." She kissed his cheek and went to water the plants. He sat down slowly, but something was wrong. The ticking clock on the wall, 3:14 in the morning. He looked outside, pitch black. He looked down and saw wet footprints leading from the kitchen to his chair. He stood in panic, turning to call for Nora, but she was frozen mid-step, unmoving, unblinking. He touched her shoulder, ice cold. Then her head slowly turned toward him, her face stitched shut, her eyes hollow. And from behind him, from deep beneath the floor, he heard the crying again. Only this time, it wasn't asking to be S.